Thank you so much, Bill. And as he said, you can catch him in the mornings, the Eagle 980 AM online. The only problem I have with this show is they tend to talk about the demon deacons an awful lot up there in Winston-Salem. You don't hear a whole lot about the wolf pack. I'll have to call in and just bug him about it. For the next few minutes, I want to kind of recap a lot of what you've heard, give you an idea what the rest of the afternoon is going to hold. We have several more speakers, including our former Secretary of State and Attorney General, Mr. Rufus Edmisten. He'll be here about 2:30 to share the Democratic perspective on it, because he is a man who's been a part of North Carolina politics for decades and decades. He served in it firsthand. We're going to do something unusual and unique. I don't think I've ever seen it done at a rally before, but I got the idea that in celebration of our First Amendment right, what better way than to follow the example of our own Congress, who concludes each business day with their little 2-minute speeches. And any person can get up and talk for 2 minutes about whatever's on their mind. So I have allocated the last 30 minutes today from 3:30 to 4 to allow you, the citizens who cared enough to come out, your 2 minutes at the microphone. If you would like to come up and speak this afternoon during that last 30 minutes, we'll allow it to the first 10, because obviously there'll be some time consumed changing between people. The first 10 people who come up will get their 2 minutes at the microphone during the last half hour. I think that is your opportunity to stand up and have your voice heard, because after all, that's why we're here today. Bill asked how many of you had ever read the North Carolina Constitution. I want to read the preamble to you in case you've never heard it. We, the people of the state of North Carolina, grateful to Almighty God, the sovereign ruler of nations, for the preservation of the American Union and for the existence of our civil, political, and religious liberties, and acknowledging our dependence upon Him for the continuance of those blessings to us and our posterity, do for the more certain security thereof and for the better government of this state, ordain and establish this Constitution. I spend a lot of time on Facebook, as many of you know, having conversations about things just such as this. I'm a retired Army officer. I spent a career over 20 years in the military. My basic branch was military police. I learned how to investigate. I learned how to separate fact from fantasy. And so I want to point out a few facts that help support the notion that there is a proper role for God and His laws in our governance. In Article 1, Section 12 of our state constitution, and the primary reason we stand here today, it is called the right of assembly and petition. The people have a right to assemble together, to consult for their common good, to instruct their representatives, and to apply to the General Assembly for the redress of grievances. To instruct your representatives. Does that not create a direct burden on them to listen to us? Try to get one to hold a town hall.
Yeah. Or even call you back.
Or even return a phone call, yes. This is what creates that direct relationship. But it places on us that strong burden to be good stewards of our own government as citizens, to be involved, to vote, and to talk amongst ourselves in educating each other. You've already heard it stated that it's foolish to govern without God in the Bible. Our Constitution is suited only for a moral and religious people. Why would those founders believe that? Because the limited government defined by our Constitution is only suitable for a people who regulate themselves. People who regulate themselves, who abide by moral codes, do not need a government to tell them how to behave. And in doing so, we become the proper standard by which we tell government how to behave. They spoke of some of the founders being deists and God's taking a handoff approach. And I find that even though they may have held that personal belief, that is not what they put in our founding documents. There are numerous references to God's divine providence over us, His continued intercession in our affairs, and our worthiness of His continued blessings. The Constitution says, or the Declaration of Independence refers to those rights as unalienable. Unalienable by man, but not unalienable by God. Because what God granted, He can certainly take away. So are we worthy today as a nation of the blessing of those rights? And that's the question I think we all need to be asking ourselves. Are we becoming a more moral and more godly people? Many argue today about our Constitution and argue for freedom. We need to draw a critical distinction between freedom and liberty. Freedom is the absence of restraint. And for me, liberty is the exercise of freedom within established boundaries. Our forefathers were not crazy. And they knew that the role of God's influence on us as people would ultimately be what determined the success of this nation. When Jefferson said, you know, criminals and politicians, you have to bind the politicians down with the chains of the Constitution so that they do not become legal versions of the former. But what binds us down? There are two sides to that equation, government and the people. And we both have the same capacity to abuse the power that God has given us. And when either abuses that power, we are wrong. When I look at our court systems, where our justice is handed out, and I go back to being a police officer, I look for facts. What tells me what our forefathers did over these last 2 centuries? One of the things that has been a constant in our court system has been the use of His Bible, on which you place your hand when you take your oath of truthfulness. The bailiff begins each session of court saying, God save the United States and this honorable court. That doesn't sound like a standoff God. God watch over us. God give us the wisdom to dispense justice wisely. So then I ask you, were our founding fathers hypocrites? That they would construct a government under this Constitution with no place for God in it, and then turn around and establish a judicial system that not only made him a part of the daily practice of dispensing justice, but lo and behold, they carved His 10 Commandments into the stone of our Supreme Court building and hung them over the chair of the Chief Justice. But Major Dave, separation of church and state. I'll tell you, got my copy of the Constitution right here. Got a $100 bill in my wallet. You can come up and show me where it is. That $100 bill is yours. It ain't in there. And to the extent that they intended to separate the institutions of church and government so that they did not have a repeat of what they had fled from in England, there certainly was no intent to separate government from morality. But Major Dave, you're just trying to force your religious views on everybody else through the power of government. Not at all. If you see someone injured on the side of the road, do you have a moral obligation to help that person? If you do, government has nothing to do with that, and that obligation would exist, I submit to you, even if we had no government at all. Morality is about doing the right thing. And our focus today has to shift from doing what can I do to what should I do. As Dr. Laura used to always say when she closed her show, do the right thing. A very simple phrase, but so powerful in its meaning. I'm a citizen like you. I'm a man with an opinion. And I'm willing to get up and speak publicly like so many of you are here today. And it is people like us who have to band together to reach out to all the others who are not here. We lead by example. We lead by word and deed. Your contribution may be doing nothing more than printing up some flyers for a candidate this fall, but you have local elections coming up here in just a matter of a couple of weeks. And who wins those elections is going to go a long way to determining what your kids learn in school in these next couple of years. We're fighting something here called Common Core. The people who are implementing don't even know what's in it. I think they took lessons from Obamacare, because the people who are implementing that don't know what it is. Our school system has shifted their focus from what kids carry home in their heads. They're trained to take a test. I grew up not a mile from here in the Boylan Heights neighborhood. And I tell people I grew up surrounded by Dorothy Dix Hospital, Central Prison, and the legislature. So I had crooks and crazies all around me. But we grew up being taught in schools things we carried home in our hearts. It was values. And it was the values that, as even Bill noted, we have students in law school now that aren't even being taught constitutional law. We are surrounded and faced with problems that we are just now realizing are actually problems. And it can be overwhelming. And what keeps it from becoming overwhelming is the kinship that we develop between all of us that reminds us every day we are not alone in this. Maybe your little part, like I said, is just passing out some flyers for a candidate. Maybe it's making a couple of phone calls for an hour, on behalf of a candidate. Whatever you can do. The only thing that's unacceptable is doing nothing. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody has talents. Everybody has a capacity that they can turn towards it. Our children and our grandchildren are counting on us, and we cannot let them down. I don't want to spend my golden years making apologies to my grandchildren for why things have fallen apart. There is that higher law. Those laws of nature and of nature's God. And I explain it to people this way. And one of the reasons, my copy of the Constitution in this little booklet actually has both documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Because to me, they are inseparable. It's like a political party. It has a platform and it has a plan of organization. And the platform defines your values and what you stand for. And the plan of organization defines how you'll go about promoting and preserving those values. The Declaration of Independence is our platform as a nation. It defined us to the world as a godly people. It did not call us a Christian nation, but lo and behold, it defined us as a godly people. And declared us as that to the world. And it took a decade of arguing amongst ourselves to finally come up with a Constitution. And even then, we didn't get full consensus till we had amended it with the first 10 amendments. It was never meant to be the revered document. It was always meant to be suspect because they knew it could be perverted. They knew that the men elected to implement it could pervert it and turn it into something it was never intended to be. And that's why if you go back to the Declaration of Independence, it says that when any form of government becomes destructive of those ends of preserving our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it is our duty to throw it off and institute such form of government as may affect our happiness. I'm not giving up on this Constitution. I think it's still exactly good the way it was written. We just need to stick to it and hold our elected representatives accountable. We hear representatives get elected. I'm going to go to Washington. I'm going to change things, and I'm not going to call names. I'm sure you've got one already. And after a little time in Washington, what's the phrase? They go up there to do good and come back doing well. Yeah. And they explain to us, but you just don't understand how things are in Washington. Well, folks, that's the tail wagging the dog. It is not up to us to settle for and accept what Washington is able to cobble together. If it is, we're electing the wrong people. We need to send people to Washington who can make Washington work the way it was designed to work. We just don't need any more excuses. The role of God in our governments goes directly to the heart of what each one of us does, whether it's as a citizen or as an elected official. We've always elected people of faith to lead this nation. And if we ever steer away from that, it will take us even further down the path of decline. I'm not so much interested in what denomination our president is. I am more concerned with, are they a godly person in their heart? Do they seek to do the right things? Because even godly people disagree from time to time. I've been influenced by many people since I got involved in grassroots politics about 3 or 4 years ago. And I want to bring one of them up here now to talk to you. Because when she was born, she was not an American citizen. She's actually from Canada. But I know of no person in Wake County that's any more active, supportive, dedicated to our Constitution and our form of government here in North Carolina and in the United States as the chairman of the Wake County Republican Party, Ms. Donna Williams.